In the late 1960s, a dark chapter unfolded in American history, centering around the charismatic yet malevolent figure named Charles Manson. Manson, a failed musician with a troubled past, managed to enthrall a group of devoted followers, whom he called the Family. This group, comprised mostly of young women, became infamously known for their killing involvement in a series of brutal murders that shocked the world. Manson convinced his cult that a race war was imminent and that they were destined to trigger it through acts of violence. These heinous crimes, marked by their brutality and apparent randomness, led to Manson's arrest and eventual conviction. Before we dive in, please remember to hit the like button to support this episode if you're enjoying it, and subscribe to the channel to receive notifications about our weekly episodes. Without hesitation, let's get into it. Charles Mills Manson was born on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio, to Kathleen Maddox, a 16-year-old unwed mother. Manson's childhood was marked by neglect and instability. His mother, who had a criminal record, spent periods in prison, leaving Manson in the care of various relatives and foster homes. This tumultuous upbringing laid the groundwork for his later psychological and behavioral issues. From a young age, Manson displayed propensity for delinquency. He committed his first known crime at the age of 13, stealing money from a grocery store. His early criminal activities led to the repeated stays in the juvenile centers. During these years, he also faced allegations of being sexually assaulted and suffered from a lack of consistent adult supervision and guidance. By his late teens, Manson had become well acquainted with the criminal justice system, having been arrested for various offenses including theft and burglary. Manson's repeated offenses landed him in several reformatories. Afterwards, he was sent to the National Training School for Boys in Washington, D.C. While there, psychological evaluations noted that he had an IQ of 109, but exhibited severe antisocial behavior and a lack of emotional stability. Despite attempts at rehabilitation, Manson continued his criminal activities. In 1955, Manson married Rosalie Jean Willis, a hospital waitress, and they had a son, Charles Manson Jr. However, the stability was short-lived as Manson continued his criminal behavior. Later, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for driving a stolen car across the state lines. During his incarceration, Rosalie divorced him, taking their son with her. After his release, Manson continued his life of crime, engaging in pimping and fraud. He married again in 1959 to Leona Candia Stevens, but this marriage also ended in divorce due to his continued imprisonment. Manson spent much of the late 1950s and early 1960s in and out of prison, where he honed his manipulative skills and learned about various forms of psychological manipulation. While in prison, Manson became deeply interested in music and the burgeoning counterculture movement. He learned to play the guitar and began to dream of becoming a famous musician. His charisma and ability to influence others became evident during this period, as he gathered a small following of fellow inmates who were drawn to his charismatic and rebellious persona. After his release from prison in 1967, Charles Manson moved to San Francisco, a hub of the counterculture movement. There, he quickly immersed himself in the city's vibrant and rebellious scene. Manson, with his charisma and guitar skills, began attracting a group of followers who were drawn to his anti-establishment promises of a new utopian society. Manson's initial followers were primarily young women, who were disillusioned with society and seeking a sense of belonging. They were often from middle-class backgrounds, but felt alienated from their families and the mainstream culture. Manson's ability to offer them a sense of purpose and family made him a magnetic figure. He preached love, peace, and freedom from societal constraints, which resonated with the ideals of the 1960s counterculture. Among Manson's early followers were Mary Bronner, a librarian who allowed Mansons to move in with her, Lynette Fromm, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Leslie Van Houten. These women were captivated by Manson's teachings and began living with him in a communal lifestyle that involved heavy drug use, particularly LSD and free love. In 1968, Manson and his followers moved to Los Angeles, where he hoped to launch his music career. They initially lived in the home of Dennis Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys, who had picked up two of Manson's female followers hitchhiking. Wilson was intrigued by Manson's charisma and musical talent, so he introduced him to various music industry contacts. However, Manson's abrasive personality and erratic behavior soon alienated many potential supporters. After their stay ended with Wilson, the group relocated to Espond Ranch, a dilapidated movie set for Western films. The owner, George Espond, allowed them to stay in exchange for work around the ranch and sexual favors from the women. Espond Ranch became the central headquarters for the Manson family, where Manson exercised total control over his followers. The isolation of the ranch allowed Manson to intensify his indoctrination of the group, which now included around 30 members. Manson's teachings were a chaotic mix of New Age philosophy, Scientology, the Bible, and his own apocalyptic versions. He interpreted the Beatles' White Album as a prophetic message, particularly the song Helter Skelter, which he believed predicted an imminent race war.
And that's about the extent of it. All this occult, all that hocus pocus stuff that you guys are playing, I don't know nothing about all that.
You know nothing about something called Helter Skelter. Tell me, Charles, I don't know.
It's worse than a fairy tale.
It's a fairy tale.
It's a comedy. It's a comedy tragedy.
Manson told his followers that the war would result in the downfall of white society, and that they as a chosen group would emerge from hiding to rule over the survivors. Manson believed that African Americans would rise up against whites, but they would ultimately need guidance from Manson and his followers, who would have hidden in the desert during the chaos. He convinced his followers that they were the true chosen people, destined to survive and dominate. Manson's prophecies were not coming to fruition and his frustration grew. He began to preach the need for violent action to incite the race war he envisioned. This marked a significant shift in the family's activities from drug-fueled hedonism to violent criminal acts. Manson ordered a series of murders to instill fear and chaos, which he believed would accelerate the onset of Helter Skelter. The most infamous of these murders occurred on August 9, 1969, when Manson directed his followers to the home of actress Sharon Tate and her husband, director Roman Polanski. On the night of August 8, 1969, Sharon Tate, the wife of film director Roman Polanski, was at their home at 150 Cielo Drive in the Benedict Canyon area of Los Angeles. Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, was not alone. She was hosting several friends, including Jay Sebring, a celebrity hairstylist, Abigail Folger, a coffee heiress, and her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski, a Polish actor. Roman Polanski was in Europe working on a film at the time. Manson sent 4 of his followers, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to carry out the attack at the Polanski residence. Watson was the leader, with Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Kasabian supporting him. Manson had chosen this house because he had previously visited it when it was rented by music producer Terry Melcher, who had rejected Manson's music career. The group arrived at the house late at night. Linda Kasabian, who served as the lookout, stayed outside by the car while the others approached the property. They cut the telephone lines to prevent any calls for help. As they approached the house, they encountered 18-year-old Stephen Parent, who was visiting the property's caretaker, William Garrettson. Parent was shot and killed by Tex Watson as he tried to drive away.
Oh no, Bubs, don't hurt me.
The three intruders entered the house through a window. Inside, they confronted the inhabitants. Watson, wielding a gun and a knife, and the two women, armed with knives, rounded up the victims and gathered them in the living room. Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski were bound with rope. Sebring was the first to be killed. He was shot by Watson and then repeatedly stabbed. Sebring was trying to protect Sharon Tate, pleading for her life as he was attacked. Folger managed to break free from her bonds and attempted to flee, but was chased by Krenwinkel, who caught her and stabbed her multiple times. Despite being mortally wounded, she tried to escape again, but was finally overpowered and killed on the lawn outside the house. Frykowski also attempted to escape and fought back fiercely, struggling with Atkins and Watson. He was shot twice, struck over the head with a blunt object, and stabbed 51 times before succumbing to his injuries. Tate, who was pregnant, was the last to be killed. Despite her pleas for the life of her unborn child, she was stabbed 16 times by Atkins and Watson. After the murders, the killers used Tate's blood to write "pig" on the front door of the house. Following Manson's instructions to leave macabre messages to incite fear and confusion, they then left the scene and returned to the Spawn Ranch. Linda Kasabian, who had stayed outside as a lookout, was deeply traumatized by what she had witnessed and did not participate in the killings. Her testimony would later prove crucial in the prosecution of Manson and his followers. The following morning, the housekeeper Winifred Chapman discovered the horrific scene and alerted the police. The brutal nature of the killings, combined with the high profile of the victims, particularly Sharon Tate, who was a rising Hollywood star, sent shockwaves through Los Angeles and the world. The downfall of Charles Manson's cult, known as the Manson family, was a complex process involving multiple investigations, arrests, and trials. It was marked by the unraveling of the group's criminal activities and the eventual capture and prosecution of Manson and his key followers. The murders of actress Sharon Tate and 7 others in August 1969 marked the beginning of the end for the Manson family. The brutality and high-profile nature of these crimes drew intense media attention and law enforcement scrutiny. Initially, the police struggled to connect these murders to Manson and his followers due to the seemingly random and senseless nature of the attacks. Before being linked to the Tate LaBianca murders, Manson and several of his followers were arrested on unrelated charges. The group was apprehended for a series of car thefts and other crimes. These arrests provided law enforcement with an opportunity to interrogate the members and gather more information about their activities. A major breakthrough in the case came when Susan Atkins, one of the Manson's followers, was arrested on unrelated charges and subsequently boasted about her involvement in the Tate murders to her cellmates. She provided detailed accounts of the crimes implicating Manson and other family members. Atkins' confession was a crucial piece of evidence that helped authorities connect the dots and build a case against the cult. She eventually turned herself into authorities and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for immunity. Kasabian's detailed and credible testimony during the trial provided a first-hand account of the murders and Manson's direct involvement in orchestrating them. The trial of Charles Manson, along with co-defendants Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten, began in July 1970. The proceedings were highly publicized and sensationalized, drawing widespread media attention. Manson's erratic behavior in court, including carving an X into his forehead, further highlighted his manipulative and controlling nature. Manson and his co-defendants were found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were sentenced to death. However, in 1972, California abolished the death penalty and their sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. Over the years, Manson and his followers repeatedly sought parole, but were consistently denied due to the heinous nature of their crimes and the lack of remorse shown. The Manson family murders had a profound impact on American society, symbolizing the dark side of the 1960s counterculture and the dangers of charismatic cult leaders. The case also led to changes in California law, including the establishment of the California Department of Justice Bureau of Investigation and the development of more sophisticated forensic techniques. Charles Manson remained incarcerated until his death in 2017. His followers, including Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and others, remained in prison, with occasional parole hearings that consistently resulted in denials. The Manson family's legacy persisted in popular culture, serving as a cautionary tale about the perils of blind obedience and the allure of extremist ideologies. How do you think Manson was able to manipulate his followers so effectively? What are your thoughts on the influence of charismatic leaders like Charles Manson? I'll be reading all your comments and looking forward to see your opinions on the subject. As always, stay tuned for future crime and mysterious stories to come. Till the next time, see ya.